When I was a kid growing up, if upbringing was, Beetle, who you?
Right.
Who you? That the point was to strip someone. No. It's to empower. On the contrary, it's to empower your everything. If it's not going to empower the individual, then this is not it.
Welcome to Homesick for Lubavitch, a podcast where we explore Lubavitch identity in the year 2023. My name is Bentzi and I will be your host. Let's begin. Okay, so I'm here in Montreal at the Montreal Torah Center with Rabbi Moshe, who was gracious enough to give me the time and give this podcast the time on a Thursday afternoon. I'm sure you have many other things to do, and thank you for joining. Before we begin, I do want to also reminisce a little bit and thank you as well for something from many years ago. When I first started, after I got married, this project called Yuvla, which, in some way or another is the origin story of this. I'm not gonna recount now the whole journey, but Yuvla was a idea to have a newsletter in Chabad houses for Yom Tovim with longer form, deeper dive essays into halacha and Kabbalah and Chassidus and so on. I put together a few essays and I reached out to a few shliachim to put it on their Chabad houses. I didn't ask for any money. It was free of charge. For whatever reason, not too many people were interested in that either, even though, there were a few. Some people thought I had an angle, I guess. I don't know. I don't remember. And I was also a newbie. I was a nobody. I was fresh out of kollel, I guess. And in any case, Rabbi Nu was gracious enough then to right away be open to it and provide his feedback. And I think even I renamed one of the essays based on your advice. I don't know if you remember. But in any case, I owe you a thank you for that back then, and thank you again for agreeing to do this. So I figured we'd begin by something that I've always wondered about the new family in Australia, because I did spend a few years as a child in and I did get to know your parents, Mr. Max, Mr. Mendel, and Asya Nu. Your mother, of course, is also related to my family, to my grandmother, and so we got to know them. I saw the home that you grew up in. I assume that's the same home, and so the question then becomes: growing up off Balaclava Road in East St. Kilda.
From the age of 13. But
from the age of 13.
Yeah.
But you lived somewhere else before then? Right, but you grew up, it's a beautiful community. It's a very, very, it's a very well-off community. It's a beautiful life that you live down under. How did you end up here? And how did you end up in 770 in Lubavitch and then eventually in Montreal? So I thought we'd start off digging a little bit there. What was it like to grow up as a child in Australia? Did you grow up as a Lubavitch kid? Is that how you saw yourself? What was it like?
Initially, no. Believe it or not, notwithstanding the fact that my mother and her parents, Rabbi and Chaysher Klufgand, were directed by the Frierdiker Rebbe to come to Australia. They didn't see themselves as shluchim. In fact, the word shliach I didn't even hear growing up till, I'll tell you, the first set of shluchim bachrim that came in 1967, labeled Captain Olav Shalom and that group, they weren't even called shluchim either. They were called the bachrim. It was only the second or third group that Australia started to develop spiritually, the yeshiva, and there were other bachrim that they became known as shluchim. It was the bachrim first. But the Lubavitchers that came, they were sent. Reb Zalman Rabransky, sent by the Frierdiker Rebbe, he was the official representative of Lubavitch, also related to you. Mm-hmm. Rabbi Groner later The word shliach didn't exist. They were chassidim, Lubavitch, we all knew they were sent. So I didn't consider myself anything. There were virtually no labels around. There weren't labels of any kind. The school, the Lubavitch Yeshiva, most of the children in my class were from non-observant homes.
Yeshiva College.
Yeshiva College, yeah. Things really changed in terms of my identity and how I saw myself and the big picture when the Rebbe sent the Bachrim, the first group, the first 6 and the subsequent groups. They really changed the landscape in that way for my generation. And so I would say already I was 10, the first group arrived. Already I guess at Bar Mitzvah I would have said I'm Chabad. Perhaps no one would even ask you. So what are you? Who are you? But 15, 16, then Chassid, or aspiring to be a Chassid. And the Shluchim made a huge impact to Bachrim. I wanted to be like that. My father relates the story. Not my father, actually. Shlomo Majeski from that first group told me many years later when I came to 770 already. He said it was 2 weeks after we arrived. The first group in those days, 1967. And he said, your father wanted to encourage us. And so he says, Chevre, it's schon gepeilt. You've already accomplished something. He said, I overheard someone ask my son Moshe, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, I want to be like them, pointing to you guys. Apparently you guys were there. So this was at 10 even. They'd made such an impact. And this is strange perhaps to your listeners because my Zayda, sent by the Fiedeke Rebbe, Chassid, a long white beard. But it was all very organic. The school was a community school. We learned 2 hours a day, Limudei Kodesh, from 9 to 11, from 11 to 4, Limudei Chol. Later, as we got older in the secular studies, we learned Mishnayos for the last hour, and then later, after my day, a little bit, Kol HaYom, the Holy Torah kind of system began for those who wanted it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I was in Yeshiva College, like I said, and my days in the elementary school was still half and half. I think in Mesivta, like the high school, they were giving an option.
Yeah.
And it was still, in my days, which was many years after you, I learned with some of your nephews. It was still a mix of a school where like half of the class were from Lubavitch families and half of them.
Well, in my day,
was not even half.
No.
Like,
Frum was, observant was some. If Lubavitch was a handful of Lubavitches,
right.
All my teachers growing up were not Lubavitch, not
right.
one of them, except later on, they weren't Lubavitches.
Did you know your grandfather? Was he alive when you grew up?
Rabbi,
yeah,
of course. He passed away after I was married.
So you grew up with him.
Yes.
And so when you grew up with him, you see this dmus of a chassid from as real as it gets, and then with the broken English, right? I'm sure. And then you see your father. Your father didn't grow up in Australia.
He was born in Australia.
He was born in Australia. Okay, so you grew up with a chassid of a father, a grandfather who looks like a chassid from Russia, is a chassid from Russia. A father grew up in Australia. How did you, like, I know you said that you didn't see yourself as a Lubavitcher until the Shluchim came, but what was that like? Did you connect at all to who your grandfather was in the world that he came from, or was it too distant?
Good question. I definitely connected. It was distant in a way. It was. He was just there. He was we knew he was a chassid, a Lubavitcher, and we were from family, So.
Right.
But just to give you an idea, you could count on one hand in those days in Australia, in Melbourne, those who observed Chalav Yisrael.
Right.
We didn't.
You didn't?
No, until I was 13, 14, it became more available, and I started asking for it. But some of my Zaydin was very frum, a chassid, and only had Chalav Yisrael in the house, which meant there wasn't much dairy products. I would go there as a kid every 6 weeks or so and spend Shabbos. This is where before we moved to that part of town. He was kind of a makivdik, a figure on the peripheral. Although he taught he didn't teach me personally, but he taught in the school.
Oh, yeah.
He taught in the school. But there wasn't a great emphasis of Chabad or Lubavitch. We used to have in the school, and this was deliberate, I guess. We used to have gatherings, Yud Beis Tammuz, Yud Tes Kislev, but for the most part, our teachers were Holocaust survivors and not Lubavitchers. They were Litvische, Ungarische, Polish. And so in the classroom, growing up, very little Chabad influence. I didn't know what a Tanya was. Never heard the word Tanya till 13, probably. Today it's shocking. There's no kid that doesn't. But then the Chabad component was peripheral. There was a Rebbe that had sent, and kind of in the background, it was a Torah day school. I grew up really in a Torah day school atmosphere, largely.
I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, or what I'm thinking about is that, you know, is there a phone ringing?
It's on silent.
Yeah, I'm hearing something else. I think a lot about trajectories, like the patterns of where things are going. You know, so it's just you mentioned the shluchim being this kind of defining point, but until that time, it seems that if you were to map out where things are going for the Yidden in Australia, you have the typical story of the Zayda Holocaust survivor with the beard, the next generation who's frum, but with a beard or not a beard, lavdafka, right? And then the grandkids, like, where do you think you would have ended up? Like, it seems like, you know, you probably would have been frum, right? But, like, very Australian, you know?
Yeah, I would have probably, I would hope, still been frum. I always, apparently, and I do remember this, my father mentioned this, I was always drawn towards Jewish studies. I loved it. I loved the Jewish studies more than the secular studies, so just drawn towards it. I would imagine I would have been frum, and like most Australians, gone to university, become some kind of academic.
That's probably what you would have been.
Probably.
You've been a very Australian, you know, religious Jew, observant Jew, but like very Australian, probably with an identity more Australian than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not drawn to business. I would have gone into academia somehow.
Right.
I'm sure.
Right. Yeah. So like, what I'm thinking about is you have, you know, in Lubavitch a lot of times we talk about, you know, American assimilation, right? But what's interesting about this story, at least at the beginning of it, is that in many ways that same trend was happening for you, and what's to me especially interesting about that is that we assume also that it can happen to us. You know, that's what happens to the Reform, let's say. You know, that's what happens to people that have left the derech or whatever. But in the story that you're telling me, you know, your Zayda was a Chassidish Yid. Your father's a Frum Yid. I remember your father, right? And you know, you still see that trend. And so it's very interesting to think about where that trend was going, how it turned, but also to think about there's no guarantees that things stay static. You know, I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, today there's always this kind of shock, like, oh my goodness, people are not the way their parents are, or they're not the way their grandparents are. This is how it's always been, right?
It's a natural progression.
This is how it's always been, and it's always an uphill battle. It's always a fight. It's always a lavdafka.
Although there is this element, it's the great nevuah, v'heshiv levavas albanim, that the last generation will be generation le'rov la'lechem le'tzama l'mayim ki nishmeh divrei Hashem. The 60s were a turbulent time, and people were searching. So, you know, it may have happened that in this search, that it was kind of a universal thing. It would have led some, myself included, back to Yiddishkeit, but that would have been, you know, almost a mazel thing, not a trend.
Right. I'm not trying to know exactly where you would end up, because we don't know, and really it's irrelevant, because this is where you ended up. Yeah. Who cares where you might have ended up? But you know, just I think the trend line was going very noticeably in a direction,
for sure,
and. I think that's just important to point out and think about. So if
measures aren't taken,
yeah,
and we just allow things to organically unfold. That's where it's going to go. Yeah.
Especially when, and I think we'll get back to this later on, especially when you have such a I don't want to say a negative word, but such a significant, substantial change in the underpinning conditions, in the sense that your Zayda, even though he was your grandfather, and I'm sure you had a very special bond with him on a family, personal level, he grew up in a world that was utterly foreign to you. I mean, I'm speculating here, but I'm also pretty sure. I mean, just objectively.
And he did not seek to impose it or influence.
And he also wouldn't be able to, because he would be one man surrounded by.
I often wonder why he didn't exert more influence, make demands. Mm-hmm. He didn't. None.
That was his personality.
No, he was a very strong personality. He was a takif, and he was a kanoi in many ways, personally, but not demanding that of others. Never even suggested anything to me. I should do this or the other. Taught me about my mitzvah, my pilpul, maimer.
He taught you a maimer?
Yeah. Although, interestingly enough, in those days, we were a handful, 3-4 boys, and ever said a maimer.
And what language?
In Yiddish.
You spoke Yiddish?
My first language was Yiddish, actually. We spoke Yiddish at home. Mm-hmm. And
both of your parents held on to that? A
decision my parents made. By the time the other kids came along, it dissipated. But that's how we were brought up, interestingly enough, which has served me well. Mm-hmm. Just the maimer that I said was not in the sing-song melody the way a maimer is said. I didn't even know there was one, frankly.
Right.
I pushed it, said it, by heart, the whole thing. Maimer in Yiddish, or Tfiga Bes Yiddish, my modem, there's a sefer, my modem Yiddish, was published at the time in the newspapers. He's my modem. So, but we said a maimer.
That's a maimer you said. You didn't say the bar mitzvah maimer.
No, it wasn't even a mitzvah maimer. Got a letter from the Rebbe. My tefillin, well, Lubavitch tefillin, but not Dalet Adad, not the size of, that's now uniform. Rabbi Moshe, that came later when the Rebbe came out, Purim Lamed Vav. So for sure it wasn't Rabbi Moshe. But even the Rashis were just smaller, maybe a little bit bigger than my friends.
Moshe.
Yeah. Arizal, not even Alter Rebbe.
Your Zayda would see you ever drink or eat something that wasn't Chalav Yisrael?
Sure.
And it didn't bother him, at least not.
I'm sure it did.
No, but I'm saying he didn't like get nervous or make you feel bad about it.
No, that's for sure not. I think in his mind, I don't know how he rationalized it. It wasn't available. It was It was, but with difficulty. Certainly no chocolates, chalav yisrael, no ice cream, nothing. The only thing was no cheeses even. The only thing that available was, I think cheeses they imported. It was milk. And it wasn't pasteurized and would often go,
bad, yeah. Yeah.
He was happy. I'm sure he was happy that his kids were, his daughter married a frum younger man.
Right.
The kids are frum. We are all, tzitzis wearing, yarmulke wearing, and going to Lubavitch yeshiva. My second brother's Yosef Yitzchak, I guess he got the choice for the second boy. Yeah. He never even expressed, interestingly enough, it's not about my Zayda, this podcast, but now that you ask, in my journey becoming the chassid, it was never like, well done, pat on the back, yishakayach, or anything, nothing.
Really?
No, nothing.
So, as you came home, I'm sure, at some points in your journey back from 770 or whatever, you didn't feel like, okay, now he's proud of me.
More or less than before? No. I presumed he was.
Right.
But he didn't show any different, it wasn't a different relationship.
That's so interesting. I mean, because I have in a way gotten the sense of that from others as well. Not exactly the same kind of story, but it does seem, and I guess this is all anecdotal, so I can't draw a full conclusion from it, but it seems like that generation almost had a little bit more trust that things would work out somehow, some way. I don't know if it was maybe after the devastation that they saw, whether it was a Holocaust or the communists and the whole world was destroyed. They figured that, like you said, just having frum grandchildren was already an etzachim, and now they're just playing with house money at this point, right? I don't know if that's what it was. But it does seem, because I was just talking, a few weeks to Mrs. Gorelik from Italy, and she said a few stories about like, episodes that she had in high school that today could easily, be level 4 alarm. What's this girl up to, and how, like warning signs, and like the people, her parents and her principal were a lot more thoughtful and trusting about it. And, so I'm just drawing from a few anecdotes, but I'm trying to piece together some kind of understanding from that. It could be that it could be they realize also what you were saying before, that organically things are going to go in a certain way. So to expect things to be static is
unreasonable.
It's not reasonable. And yeah, I think in that sense, I think a lot has changed since then. So let's go back to that. But first, let's try to keep the story chronologically, because God knows that I can get lost in a tangent. So Leopold Kaplan comes, and within a couple weeks, you revere this group of boys.
I'm enamored.
Yeah, but we have to paint a picture for people listening to this, because most people here have not been to Australia. I mean, you go to Australia, at least when I was there, I'm sure it was like that in your days. At that age, everything is about footy, right? I don't know which team your family went for.
Carlton,
obviously. Okay, that's what I went for when I was there. They almost got there this year. Whatever, right? But yeah. So like it's hard to express to people. Like Australian Jewry is a very interesting kind of. I don't think it exists elsewhere. Where very proud Jews, very real about their Yiddishkeit, but also very real about their Australianness, right?
And barbecues.
Barbecues, of course. And I mean, in general, they live a good life. They live a very good life, especially today.
Sports was a huge part of our lives.
Sports, Kashmirs, the world. Life is very, very real over there. And thank God they have a lot of it. So I'm saying that not to bring up your past misdeeds, although it doesn't seem like you're embarrassed of them anyhow, but more just to paint a picture of like, a 10-year-old has these footy stars, these football stars that he has their cards of perhaps, or just knows about them. And then this group of bearded men with hats come from New York. From a cloistered Lubavitch perspective, it's like, yeah, sure, the shluchim were, they of course made an impression on a young boy. But when you live in Australia for a little bit, it's like, why? Like, this guy doesn't know how to play football. Like, what's his deal? Why do you think after just a couple of weeks, all of a sudden, they captured your attention?
It's hard to say, especially as a 10-year-old. But I don't know, they exuded. There was a joy about them. They exuded like a real kind of course, way too young to identify any of this. But I'm just looking back. There was a joy about them. They were cool. They were, I think, since you're asking, I'm thinking now, on the one hand, they're the chassid like my Zayda, and yet they're Americans, and they speak a perfect English, and they're cool, and they connect to us, and they relate to us. That was, I guess, disarming. That was something unique.
They brought together the different parts of your life, your Zayda and your father. And
that's right, a relatable chassid. A relatable chassid. They made such an impression. I can tell you, I remember each one of them in vivid detail, that first group. And the next groups, too. Tell you the suits they wore, the shoes that they wore. I still remember. Everything about them was like, fascinating. It was fascinating.
When did you realize that, like, it's not just about their camaraderie and their charisma, but there's something behind them?
And it took a few years. Shlomo Majeski had a profound influence on us. He was the Pied Piper. We loved and we adored him. Mesibe Shabbos, the stories, he was just incredible. And the stories, believe it or not, we weren't told stories, Chassidish stories.
Mm.
At my Zayda's table, when I was there Friday night, he would read from Zevin, Sefer Chassidim, whatever. But they started telling us stories, and the stories drew us in. The stories drew us in. Baal Shem Tov, Chassidus. Again, our teachers were not Lubavitches. Chabad Chassidus was not on the curriculum. In the Lubavitch Yeshiva in those days, it just wasn't. I never heard of the book Tanya, till I was bar mitzvah a little bit earlier. So they introduced us to this world. Camp had a big influence. Camp had a big influence. Being with him 24/7, although it was only a 10-day camp, it had a profound influence. The songs, the chayas, the stories, and then slowly but surely, the realization. To me, Rebbe, till they came, and even later, was a picture on my Zayda's wall. There was a picture, a painting, it wasn't even a photograph, a painting.
Of the Frierdiker Rebbe?
Of the Rebbe, of our Rebbe. So I knew there was a Rebbe, but you can just unrelated.
What was your Zayda's relationship with the Rebbe? He had gone straight from the Frierdiker Rebbe to Australia?
But related. My Zayd was first cousins with Rebbe Sanchana.
Okay, so they're related.
Yeah, actually, first cousins both ways because a brother and a sister married a brother and a sister from both his father and mother. The story, that's not for now, but the story of my grandfather coming to Australia is fascinating because our Rebbe, when he came to Paris, wanted my Zayda to be a Rav in Montreal and wrote letters then, I have copies of them, to Rabbi Kramer to arrange a visa because there was a Lavut family, he living in Montreal, that would sponsor him. And the Rebbe worked very hard that my Zayda should go. My Zayda didn't feel he was Rav material. In his mind, you have to be a Baki in Shas and Dalet Chelki Shulchan Aruch. The Rebbe said to him once, this is all in Paris. What do you have to know already? Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, I'll show you the Maramakomis with a smile. I mean, you can be a Rav. So actually, this is all in parentheses, when I got engaged to my wife, who was a Montreal girl, Mohammed Ni Tritel, Rabbi Kramer then gave me a gift photocopy of the 2 letters that the Rebbe sent him from the hotel where he stayed in Paris, 1947, and said now he understood because he always found it puzzling that the Frierdiker wanted Australia, our Rebbe, Montreal, and our Rebbe was the Frierdiker's biggest chassid.
So the Frierdiker Rebbe was sending him to Australia, and the Rebbe was sending him...
A kind of, yeah. And
okay.
When the Rebbe went back to America, he sent back a telegram saying, forget it, I was mishtadel, I tried, it's Australia, and that's where you're going to go. But he was mishtadel, and it was clear he was mishtadel even knowing the Frierdiker Rebbe was directing towards Australia, till he said, that's Adkan. So Rabbi Kramer said, I could never understand this. I found it puzzling, because he knew. He says, his answer was, now I understand both things had to be. For some reason, the Rebbe saw fit to create the Montreal connection in Paris. And that was when I was just engaged. Then when shlichus came along, and we had several options, and one of them was to be a Rav in a neighboring town called Shamedi, neighboring to Montreal, the Rebbe wrote, I didn't know this, but Rabbi Yoman Klein told me this unusual answer, usually Nochen, Toiv, or just underline Askelatzian. This double expression was like, very good idea, go to. So we've kind of felt that somehow this was in the works a long time ago, and I'm told I look like him, or I have...
You look like your grandfather.
Or have, his disposition in some way. Halavai, some of his mannerisms, certainly. So for some reason, there was set emotion back there. So both things had to be in this guy. Australia, Melbourne and Montreal. In fact, there was a point when the community where I was staying, Shalmedy, was declining, numbers-wise, just wasn't viable anymore. And I had offers in other places to go, to other places in the world. And then there was the idea of opening a Torah Center here. I wrote to the Rebbe, and all the choices, this was the last one. And I wrote, I don't prefer this. And I want the Rebbe to send me far away.
You had enough of Montreal?
No, just the idea of shlichus, of being far away, not being with family, just without the comforts.
Right.
My wife is a Montrealer. The Rebbe soll mir wegschicken. Send me shliach, send me in the merchakim. That's what I wrote. I'd prefer, it was Sydney, it was Chicago, and it was another place. And then there was Hatzot. So the Rebbe answered, Kadima le Canada. I showed Rabbi Moshkin, he said, first of all, Canada was talking about Montreal. So as if to say, you asked to be sent somewhere. We were sent to Canada. It's another country. And Kadima also means, not just preference, preferable and all of the above options, but also Kadima, forward march. You're given the shlichus, So it's very clear after that answer as well that Canada, Montreal is my place.
Yeah, that's interesting how it worked out that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a full circle that full circle in an unusual way. When did you? So you the shluchim brought you into their world.
Yeah.
Their world was very alive and very intriguing, compelling. At some point, though, you must have realized that you couldn't have it both ways. Like staying in Australia with your parents, the comforts of home, the comforts of what you know, and having these guys kind of spice life up. At some point, you make a choice. Either you continue on the Australian way and go to uni, right? Or you, I don't know, I guess go to 770, right? There must have been a point where you realized that's a fork in the road.
There was an extreme fork.
Okay.
It's an interesting story. Looking back, I don't know what I would advise my own child at the time, but I got it into my head that I don't want to finish high school. I'm not going on to university. I'm going to be a shliach. And so what do I need this for? And also as a teen of 16, 17, I wanted to cloister myself a little bit from the temptations of the world, which were pulling like every teen, very strongly. And what do I need this for? And so I decided I'm not finishing high school. Now, this actually created a scandal in the city. My father was deeply upset, and rightfully so. He said, I'm not asking you to go to university. You went this far, finish, and then you go to Yeshiva Gedola, and go on. And I'm adamant. The end was, I wasn't allowed in the house, I was literally told. And I wasn't allowed in Yeshiva Gedola because they wouldn't accept me without my father's permission.
He must have been also a supporter at that time.
Pardon?
He must have been a supporter of the
yeshiva. A supporter. My father is the number one supporter then of Lubavitch. Yeshiva Gedola, begufay, v'nafshe, b'memoinay, b'me'oidoi, b'zmanay. His whole life is the yeshiva. This is, by the way, the Yeshiva Gedola.
Okay, so wait 1 second. Let's just clarify that point. I didn't know if you wanted to bring it up, but I mean, your father, for those who don't know, was for many, many years the patron of
yes. My father raised.
He was a very successful businessman, and
that's right.
Right.
My father was every Sunday was never home. At least twice a week he was out collecting, as he called it, raising money for the yeshiva with Rabbi Zalman Gurevich. My father was never home.
I remember Rabbi Zalman.
Either a meeting, a shir, or collecting.
Yeah, but I just want to clarify, because it's important to the story. Your father wasn't just an askin. Your father was a successful businessman. So for the yeshiva to take in his son that he wasn't happy with was not going to happen.
Yeah, and it's a separate moshe, Yeshiva Gedola, but it's part of this umbrella. Right. Of course not. So for whatever it is, for days, I'm in the dormitory, and I still have the tapes. I taped the shiurim. Anyway, the situation was untenable. So my father...
So you were homeless.
Basically, I wasn't home and I wasn't in yeshiva formally. So this went on for a few days, maybe a little longer. And my father saw I'm holding my ground. Mr. Gas, I got in my head, that's it. I'm not doing this. I'm just not wasting this year. I'm not exposing myself anymore to all of these temptations.
Oh, it was the last year.
It was the last year for get the high school diploma. It's 1 year to go. That's it.
Right.
My father agreed in the end that Rabbi Groner was negotiating all of this to ask the Rebbe. And so they did. And I get a phone call from my father from Rabbi Groner. There's an answer. We come into his office. And Rabbi Groner shares with us that the Rebbe said that if my father agrees, then the Rebbe gives us a skam.
To go to yeshiva.
Yeah, to quit high school, to quit school and go to yeshiva Gedola, yeshiva full time. My father realized what the Rebbe is saying, and so he gave his brach, and that was the end of it. So yeah, it was a radical at some point here or there, and that's it. I'm all in, and I'm not going further with this.
Was your grandfather at all involved in this debacle?
That's an interesting thing, completely in the background. not encouraging me, certainly not criticizing me, and no congratulations when it was over. I didn't expect it. Looking back now, perhaps it's strange, but he didn't mix, he left it to my parents. He was also respectful for my parents, the chinuch that they were giving us. I mean, as a kid, I had battles, ridiculous battles. I only wanted to wear woolen tzitzis from the age of 13 or 14 or 15. That was a war.
Right.
I didn't want to wear short pants anymore. That was a war. It was crazy. My parents regretted it afterwards. Let the kid, if it's what he wants, let him. But well-meaning.
What do you think? What do you think was holding them back? Like, do you think they felt that like it's time to move on from these like old school?
No. It's more like it's time later. You're a kid, so you're a kid. Kids wear short pants. Kids.
Right. It's
hot outside. My mother. It's very hot. The Australian summers are hot. Cotton tzitzis.
Right.
They regret it. But it was. They were wars.
Right. You're the oldest in your family, right?
You're the oldest boy. After that, it was for my younger brothers was a different story.
Yeah, I'm also the oldest. The oldest always has these fights.
Yeah.
So you realize that there's and how many years after you you choose this path, you end up in 770?
It's around 15, and that 4 years later I'm in 770.
Okay, so you had
19,
had a few years in yeshiva.
Yeah, 2 years in yeshiva gedolah. I went at 17. It's at 15 I'm making this decision already. I'm on that trajectory. And at 17 I'm in yeshiva gedolah for 2 years. And then at 19, not 770. In those days, it didn't work that way. I went to yeshiva gedolah of Greater Miami, Rabbi Label Shapiro.
Oh, really?
They research.
You came to America and you didn't go to New York.
Tishrei, and then, which was a big bracha for me. It was a big bracha because I became part of the kvutza that were there. I became inseparable and close friends till today with that kvutza that was there, the shluchim that were there in Yeshiva Gedolah in Miami.
You were there as a shliach?
No, I came as a bracha from Australia, but they were my chavrusas and my close friends, Ada Yom Hazeh. In fact, there was a point in Miami where I wrote to the Rebbe that I didn't feel I was using my time properly. Maybe it's time to come to 770, smicha, get married and move on. The Rebbe said I should be mamshich in Miami, kedai lahamshich by Miami, and that also saved me because I would have come to 770 kind of lost. I came with this kvutza and I was part of them, and as I said, till today we're still close friends.
You could have gone to Holy Torah. There was a yeshiva in Karnataka.
Nobody in those days went to Holy Torah from Australia. Only one was Chaim Tzvi Grona that had gone earlier as a younger bacher. It wasn't the trend. It started after my day.
You're saying from Australia people didn't go
Nobody went.
Why not? Because it felt too big?
I have no idea. Nobody, the guys didn't go. When they went at my age, old already, 18, 19, so they're not going to Holy Torah then already. And I was from the very few that went.
I mean, because again, that's so interesting to me, because like in the Chabad mythology, I don't think this was created intentionally, but it's just kind of it's there, at least how I always understood it. It's like in those days, the Rebbe was in 770, and that was it. Like the whole scene was 770 Bachrim, Altair Bachrim, like the idea of being a bacher coming all the way to America and going to Miami, it's like, why would you do that? I mean, of course there are many rational reasons, like you just laid out. First of all, like you'd get lost in the churn and whatever you want to describe the scene. In
those days, the world was not like it is today. I had no idea what was happening in America. None.
Right.
Not what Miami looks like. Not what Holy Torah looks like. I even heard of Holy Torah.
Yeah, but you were coming to by the Rebbe, right?
Yeah. I'm going now to America, and I'm going to the goal is 770 ultimately.
Oh, okay.
And Rabbi Cohen, the Rosh Yeshiva in Melbourne, he said he did his research, trusted him. It wasn't a discussion. Miami, come on.
Right. So there was what I'm trying to get to is there was a place for the individual back then as well. Right? The idea of, let me put it this way. There are stories that I've heard, whether it was Label Raskin's kids or Gershon Mendel Gorelik's kids, how their father basically, when they were bar mitzvah, their father dropped them off in 770. Here's a bench to sleep on. Bye-bye.
Well, yeah.
Right? I'm saying there's that kind of mythology, right?
Which is true for them.
Right. But I've always kind of understood that was just a general environment going on then where, basically there's a Rebbe, that's the whole scene, and everybody just kind of got lost in it. And what you're describing is, it probably has a little bit to do with the kind of person Rabbi Cohen is. He's a very down-to-earth, rational man who never got carried away with this kind of stuff, right? But it, the way you're describing it is that there was still a space for, here's a young boy, or at 19 you're not young, but you're Australian, you're new to this whole thing. If he goes to 770, he's going to be by upbringing a lot, but he might not be by anything else.
That's right.
Okay,
they felt that it's a smaller, more structured, and closer to Australia kind of environment. Miami, not 770,
And you weren't upset that you're so close geographically, but you're missing out on Fabrengens by Kislev and Tavis or whatever.
We used to go in. We went in. Tishrei, I was there. We would go in. No. I was very grateful to be there. Mm-hmm. No, there was never that thought. I felt I needed to kind of own my place there in 770. 770 was older Bachrim, and it was, at least during my time, and I had to work my way up there.
So where do you think this... maybe I'm wrong about the way I understand how things work, but that was just always the way I kind of received it from, the way people spoke about it. Where do you think this... First of all, do you think that there is a mythology about those times being that, everything revolved around the Rebbe and everything revolved around 770, and, there being this... being on shlichus in Florida was almost like you're sent to Florida to do the Rebbe shlichus, but it's not a place you want to be. You want to be back in 770, right? And here you're describing where not only were you happy to be there then, you're happy even in retrospect that you were there.
Yeah.
Right? So, first of all, do you feel as well that there's a mythology about everything being around 770 back then? And if you do, where do you think that came from?
I'm not sure what you mean exactly. Just practically, the practicality is after my day, like my younger brother Ruvi. So that generation, they went younger. They went to Olei Torah, and they went on then Shlichus, and then 770. That was the Seder. This didn't exist in my day. It was a handful of boys that went. I was from the younger guys. The Australians before me that went were older. They'd finished high school.
Sure.
They were 2 years in Yeshiva Gedolah, or 3 sometimes. They went straight to 770. I was just simply younger. They were in their 20s, 21, 22. And so, but just 770, it's for older Bachrim. It wasn't a lot of thought.
So what do you think happened between you and your brother Ruvi?
What happened is in Australia, all the Torah started, so people finished school at a younger age, and though he didn't go to Kol Hayom. But they started going to New York earlier, 1 year YG, not 2 years. That's a huge difference. My day, you didn't go before 2 years.
But if anything, if you're going younger, then you need to be Miami more than...
No, so Olei Torah became, I don't know what happened. I can't tell you. It got a name. I don't know. I'm not even sure I even heard of Olei Torah when I was in Australia.
I'm just... Because, Olei Torah certainly was there. In some form or another, there was a yeshiva there. That's where the locals went. I'm just... to me, there's something so interesting about... It seems like there was a transition at some point. I've always tried to pinpoint
when that happens. My brother Ruvi would probably be able to tell you.
Right.
Because he's part of that generation that went to Olei Torah.
Fair enough.
That's 10 years after me.
Oh, he's 10 years younger than you.
10 years later.
And you're the brothers in between?
2 brothers, Yossel, and the shliach to Anta,
sure.
And Chaim Olav Shalom, that you remember well.
Of course. So they also went to Olei Torah, or they were with you?
You also had a different journey. I'm sorry.
No, you can be on the table. No, this thing is making noise. I
shouldn't touch it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem.
No, my brother Yosel went to Mizrahi Yeshiva. That was his journey. He went a different journey altogether.
So next time I'm in Atlanta.
You've got it. His story is incredible.
And I have a brother that lives in Atlanta. I can...
Okay, you got a good reason to go.
Yeah.
Sit him down for a few hours.
He went to Yavne?
He went to Itri.
In Australia?
No.
A Mizrahi Yeshiva outside Australia?
Yeah, he left after high school, he went. He didn't even go to YG. I don't think he went straight to Yisrael to
Mizrachi Yeshiva.
Mizrachi Yeshivas. Keren B'Yavne, and then Itri, and from there, or the other way around.
And so for a while you thought that he was going to end up with a kippah sruga or something.
He had a kippah sruga, and he'd never beard, and that's where he was. And it's one of the happiest moments in my life, aside from my marriage and children, is getting a letter from him or a tape. I'm going to Krachabad, Teresemes. I'm leaving, coming back. Yeah, he'll tell you his story. It's incredible.
What a story. Yeah, so, I mean, do you think at all that there was some kind of shift? I mean, I don't think it happened overnight at any point, but do you think over time there was a shift where, it does seem like there was a time where there was the Lamids, if you want to define it by decades, but there was a time where there was still here's the Rebbe's here, you go to Yeshiva there, the Bacham going to Montreal, Bacham going to, like you said, Florida. There wasn't that whole, the Rebbe also wasn't for bringing every week, right? It wasn't revolving intensely or on the daily level around the Rebbe's comings and goings, right? Like you said, you went for Tishrei, maybe you went in for Yud Shvat or Yud Kislev, something like that, but you were content to go to America and not be in 770 on the regular. And then at some point, it's very clear to me that at some point, being a Lubavitcher Bacher meant being in the Rebbe's goings and comings on the daily. That was what it was.
I would say the MEMS, that's when it changed. Look, before that, Crown Heights boys came to Montreal, left Crown Heights, and Label Kaplan.
Right.
Learned in Montreal as a Bacher.
He's from Crown Heights.
Sure. Not originally, but his formative years.
Right. So what do you think happened?
Why did that change? It's a good question. I need to think about it. This leads us to, I guess, the core issue, what Lubavitch is today. I think that's where you're going, I guess. There's no question. The centrality of the Rebbe definitely has grown. The centrality of his role, not be'etzem, but just in terms of our appreciation, and there's no question of that. And that's a generational thing.
Right.
It's a generational thing. If you go back to the earlier generations, the Rebbe was the Rebbe, but, Chassidim were Chassidim, and they were Tziyurim, and it was a complex, multi-layered world, Lubavitch. And as time progresses, it became much more, Rebbe Gomarnu. And the Chassid, the definition of the Chassid, or the hero, was measured by one thing only, the level of bittul and iskashrus, as opposed to the Rashishi and earlier generations, his avodah and his bittul, whatever other qualities, his haskola and avodah. Yeah. Now, why that happened, I can share with you why I think this happened and why it is a good thing. And why? Well, we'll just spill it on the table. We'll try and unpack it a little bit.
Go for it.
What has emerged over the generations and ever deeper is this. The big chiddush of the Alter Rebbe, of course, is Dire B'Tachtonin, that turned things on its head. Heaven serves earth, not the other way around. It's all about here. That's a tremendous revolution. That's developed by all the Rebbeim with greater nuance, depth, complexity. Samach Vav, Ayin Beis, the Kavan is Dafke de Tachten. The Yesh HaNivra is expressive of the Yesh HaMiti. Giluyim versus Etzem, and this is a whole new language. And the essence lies, Dafke, where there's no revelation, just being, I am. That's a huge chiddush. Dire B'Tachtonim. Without going, there's not a shir now I want to give to pontificate, but just the truth is it needs Mara Makaymis. Where does it say this? But what I'm about to say, so far it's pretty clear.
So far it's Basiligani 101.
It's pretty basic. It's basic. Yisava Kadosh Baruch Hu, the kavanah is dir b'tachtonim. The Rebbe's chiddush in that is that the kavanah is not the tachton per se. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya actually says, "Aneshama atzma eina tzicha tikun v'lo yad lamata." Why did it come down? On the shlichus. L'sakin is a guf a chelke ba'olam, and part of the whole mission of Dida B'tachtonim. So this is already in Samach Vav. It's said elsewhere, and once the Rebbe says it, there's 1,000 maramakayim, and you see it everywhere, like everything. So this turns a lot, and it was always there, but
right.
But to lay bare the Rebbe's chiddush in Maimer after Maimer, it's not about the Tachten, it's about you. It's about Neshamas Yisrael. And the Eibishter wants to have the deepest essential connection express itself in the Tachten, engage the Tachten, and illuminate the Tachten. And to put it in simple language, what's the point of a home? To live there with your soulmate. That's the point of the home. The saddest place in the world is a home where there was once a family and there's no longer. And a home, all the details of the home, as opposed to a building, what makes it a home is dafke, the pitchkis and the details that are expressive of the people that live there. So Dida B'tachtonim, Rebbe explains, is what's the kavanah? That the world in all of its detail, humanity, everything, should express this essential oneness, soulmates, Eibishter and Yidden. And who are those soulmates? Every Yid and the Eibishter. So it's all about neshamas. It's all about, the Rebbe's Maimorim ever clearer, Etzem HaNeshama, we're all one with each other and one with God. And that truth, all Jews are one with God, that the world glitter and express that. Now, we can talk about the matzav today. I feel that's what the world is screaming, in this most contorted, terrible way. That's what's happening right now. And the Jews are compelled to confront their own Jewishness in a way they never had to before, or they deluded themselves before. Right now, in these last few weeks, since the terrible tragedy. All to say, what is a Rebbe? This is exactly what the Rebbe is. Rebbe is Neshama Klalis. He is at once Klal Yisrael, at once Rebbe Yisrael. He embodies that truth. We are all one. We are individuals, but at the same time we are everyone, and the everyone is expressed in the individual. Hence, I'm saying, the closer to Bias HaMashiach, the more Rebbe, the more this fundamental, essential unity of who we are, and it's all about Neshama. It's all about the revelation of the Neshama. And that's why Rebbe, in other words, to ask a question. We all understand why we need Chassidus as Achana for Bias HaMashiach. It's a foretaste of a more Lord's Deas Hashem. But why must it come through a Rebbe? Have a drachim lamokim. The Zohar was discovered, learned. People can explain it. People learned and highly intelligent. Why Baal Shem Tov and the Rebbe? And as we pointed out, as the generations went on, especially our Rebbe, the great shift, it becomes like Anosi HaKol, so Rebbe-centered. Because, in fact, the kavanah is the neshama. Torah is there to reveal the neshama, not the other way around. And that's what the Rebbe is. And that's what we're seeing this incredible situation today. It's so many years after Gimel Tammuz. The fascination with the Rebbe is only increasing. It's with Chabad. Yesterday, we had here the whole Bells Girls High School and Seminary and their teachers. They came for a Yom Tefillah, and they wanted to take the kids out somewhere, make it exciting. Could they come here? With pleasure. And I spoke. And I spoke Chassidus, Neshama. Just the thirst and how it resonates, the deepest teachings of Chassidus, which is this, I'm saying, that you are everything and it's all about you and we are all one, and therefore, and 100 million therefores, the world is seeking this now. The world's pushed to use their Ashvi language. The world's looking for the Rebbe. They're looking for this truth. They're looking for and sensing this deep Jewish neshama truth that we are all one. We are all one. And that's what the Rebbe embodied. Plus, of course, as time goes on, the clarity of the Rebbe's leadership, how everything that Rebbe said, had we followed, we would not be where we are, but no crying over spilled milk. But just going forward, his answers and message to Klal, to the Prat, Gem is becoming wildly popular, more and more with each passing day. Who would have imagined? It's after so many years after Gimel Tammuz, and he's not fading; it's just getting stronger. So what I'm saying, I'm going on and on. It's not just the message. The message posture is Torah is just so clear and beautiful and unifies all of Torah and all comes together. It's just so deep. And aside from the message, politically at Yisrael, the prophet spoke. It's true. You can see it. Aside from that, I'm saying the fascination is the closer to Bias HaMashiach, where the Kavanah Ha'elyon of Neshamas Yisrael, all being one, Hanasahu HaKol, it's just palpable. It's just what we feel and what we need. Just to a little bit further, I told this to the kids yesterday, actually not kids, the girls in seminary. For a long time, up until Chassidus, really, the whole motivation for doing mitzvahs was schar v'einish.
Right.
That's the whole thing. Schar v'einish. Today, nobody cares. I'll deal with it when I get there, if there is or if there isn't. It doesn't talk. Sorry, it doesn't talk anymore and should not. What talks today? The Eibishter nisave. God needs you. God needs? How could God possibly need? Explain Chassidus, because he's beyond perfect and chooses to become vulnerable and need. And his need is you. Mm-hmm. You are his desire. He wants to be a part of you. Mitzvahs are not, if you do this, you get rewarded. If you don't, you're going to burn in hell. Mitzvahs at their core are, the Eibishter is saying, please, I want to be part of your life. I want to be part of the way you eat. Here's kosher. I want to be part of the way you live married. Here's mikveh. It's God's desire, craving. Desire is too strong. This Ava means craving. All I want is you. Mm-hmm. And it's something I'm saying a lot, so if you'll just allow me to share this here. It's based on Basi Lagani.
I'm not flying back till tomorrow morning. I got all night.
Okay. So we're carrying on a little bit. Right, you feel this is such an important thing, it's an important teaching. You mentioned Basi Lagani, so everybody knows the whole point there is the B'tachtoinim, and the Mishkan is the prototype, and the Shtus the Kedusha. One element of that, the Atzei Shittim, is where you take the boards, the Kroshim, and he explains what's the need of the Keresh. We take the Sheker of the world, the lie of the world, and becomes the Keresh, which then becomes the Kesher. Yeah. Simple question, which the Maimon doesn't really address, but it's obvious. How do you transform a lie? You illuminate it. You do away with it. You illuminate it. A lie is a lie. Shtus, the clip of craziness you can channel. Right. You can't channel a lie. What does it mean to transform a lie? I believe, I'm certain that the meaning of it is this. What's the big lie? There's only one lie from which spawns every other lie. That's we feel independent from Hashem. We feel our metzias, our ego. We don't feel the truth that He's constantly creating and so on and so forth. And from ego, abuse to its extreme forms then follows. It just, sure. As the famous philosopher René Descartes said, I think therefore I am. It's the truest statement, the only true statement that a human being can make, actually. He tried to come up with a statement that's irrefutable and absolutely true. I think I know, therefore I am. I could be imagining you. I could be imagining all of existence. Can't prove it. I just know that there's consciousness. I could be imagining my body, but there's a thinker here. Right. I think that I often think, I would have asked him, maybe you're a figment in somebody else's imagination that gives you the sense that I
We've come to that already. Descartes has been upended.
Upended, okay. But
in the world we live in today, we're not certain even of ourselves.
Even I think that I am. But Chassidus says, you're right. Now the question is, why did God make us so selfish?
Right.
Why is it that all I know is me? A baby's cute but selfish, and we never escape that. Can I feel what you feel?
Right.
I mean, it's a terrible thing when you think about it. I cannot feel what somebody else is feeling. Because we're both human, and I look and I see, and I can approximate, and maybe I do, maybe I don't, but I'm stuck in me. It's all I really know is me.
Yeah, we're trapped.
We're trapped. Why? That's big sheker, and that's to be transformed, not done away with. You know why? Because it is only you. You are everything for the Eibishter. There's nothing else. Look at another person, same thing's true of him, and her, and her. Everybody's everything? Yeah, every parent knows that. You can have 15 kids and your love doesn't get sliced up. You ask any parents, how are you doing? As good as the challenge for your most difficult kid. That's how you're doing. You love them all with all your heart. That's a human parent. And for the Eibishter, everybody's everything. That's the Rebbe's teaching. You are, that's taking the sheker, transforming it. The sheker is, all I know is me. Yup. Yeah. Because that's true.
Right.
Don't destroy that. Just transform it. You're the Yesha Hanivra. The reason I feel I am that I am, because the true I am that I am is invested in you. That's why you feel that. It's a corruption of that. It's all, just tweak it. Just tweak it. Bistak everything. One proviso. So is he, and so is she. Everybody's everything.
Well, I mean, what does the Gemara say? That sheker is, every sheker has a little bit of truth. So, and the letters of sheker are, they're wobbly. So every lie is essentially just a truth without legs.
Exactly.
And what you're saying is that you have to find the legs, and then it becomes a truth. I'm
going to share you something very beautiful that I heard from a shliach. Very beautiful. This is Barry Farkash, shliach in Issaquah, Washington State. I have two children, shlichas there, so I was there last summer. It was a Friday afternoon. I went to go to the mikveh, and I heard he has a beautiful mikveh which he built. He had a sister that passed away in Yerushalayim, and he built a mikveh, a gorgeous little mikveh. He's on a gorgeous, Issaquah is stunning. It's in the hills, mountains. It was just poetic and romantic, the whole scene, sitting on his balcony Friday afternoon, nestled literally in the mountains. Anyway, I know him from here because he married a Montreal girl, and he spent the summer here in MTC, voluntarily teaching and upbringing. Bissl mashke, some freshly baked kugel that his wife had just made. She brought out a tray of kugel.
The Yerushalmi dies hard.
Yeah. He's become a psychologist, a therapist. He says to me like this: why do you think the Rebbe stood hours and hours every Sunday giving out dollars? Obviously, brachas to people. It's obvious. The Rebbe is saying, bring me another Yid. I want to look him or her in the eye and tell them you are everything. That's the Rebbe's message. And that's when I answered the original question, the Rebbe, yeah. So now he's saying, Neshamas, Neshamas, Neshamas Yisrael. Yeah, that's the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely hear what you're saying, and talking about wobbly truths, I personally wobble with these things. I used to feel that because I wobble means that the thing itself is wobbly, and I don't think it's that I've become more humble. I think I've just become older and realized that sometimes it's me, it's not the thing, and I tell people that I'm a recovering cynic. So part of recovering from cynicism is realizing that sometimes something can be true without you identifying with it. You don't have to pull it down with you, right? So that's a long way of saying I accept the point you made, and because we asked a question earlier about why was there this transition in Lubavitch, and you gave an answer that, as if I understand correctly, in short, was that this is a trend of as we come closer to Bias Mashiach, there's an idea of, I guess if I could rephrase it, Yiddishkeit becoming more about the relationship and about the person. Who are you, and how you are needed, and feeling that need. And feeling that you're needed, that's become more and more central. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing I can say to argue with that. In general, that goes with the whole idea of Chassidus as a foretaste of Mashiach, where I think one of the reasons is to bring out the beauty. One is to give a taste of Mashiach, and one is to make it feel more important, more valuable, right? And to uplift them and make them connected. So there's nothing I can say to argue with it, and nor do I want to argue with it. But there are two things that I'm thinking about. One thing is that as true as that may be, there's still the fact, I think, and I asked this also to Yossi Nemes, a similar question. There's still the fact that before that, we understood that the individual needs to be catered to, right? And so in your case, that meant going to Miami Yeshiva as opposed to, let's say, Torah, right? So as true as what you're saying is, what happened to that other truth, right? If we all get swept up in the Rebbe wave, let's say, and basically just the tide lifts up all ships, what happens to the need and the truth that an individual has his own particularities, and if we get swept away, we also lose ourselves, right? And as much as a wave lifts all ships, a big wave can also drown people, right? So that's question number one. And question number two is let's do one question at a time.
So you're 100% right. Not only is your question what happened to it, if it's not going to empower the individual, then this is not it. The whole point is all neshamas are one doesn't mean uniformity. V'ata tetzave, the mind which the Rebbe gave out, it turns out before the stroke, before Gimel Tammuz. What's the nekud v'ata tetzave? And the nekud of it all is one thing. The etzem, we're all one, but it translates in the individuality, in minusha and pratim that are very different, but all threaded with the etzem. But it must manifest in the individuality. That the etzem is brought to bear on the koiches agiluyim, on the manifested conscious koiches. That's the tachlis. Not to surrender the koiches agiluyim to the etzem, but that the etzem and dafka the etzem, koiches makifim will overwhelm the conscious faculties. The etzem doesn't overwhelm because it's the essence. So when it's brought to bear, it empowers and brings to life all of the manifested faculties, intellect, emotion, and uniqueness of each person. So Adarabah, if we're talking neshama, and which we are, Mashiach neshama, that means dafka the individual. Now, and I hope it's happening now a little bit. We lost it. I don't know. I just there's and to put everybody in boxes in uniform and the chinuch. We lost it, and I think now it is starting to change.
Why do you think we lost it? Is it just too hard to have it both ways?
Because I think people didn't understand how to. There's a lot of ignorance just in terms of educators, the people that are. Mm-hmm. Look. I'm not the one to Tomcha Tamimim is a model that worked in Lubavitch. It said 14, 15 hours a day, and the whole Seder, and the way they learned. And even then, it was in a family, one bocher, the bride. It's not for everyone. And for some reason, it became like this is one size fits all. It can't work. It can't work, and especially not in a world when there's so many other options. So the principles, all the etzim doesn't change, but in terms of the way this has to be brought to our children today and so on, I think there needs to be a lot of work has to still be done. And I think it is happening. It's being compelled because we're just seeing that the kids are falling through the cracks and they're just not relating to it. Why should they? It doesn't talk to them. It must talk to them. In addition to all of that is the message, the Rebbe's message, which was not conveyed properly. When I was a kid growing up, a Fabrenga was, Bittel, who you?
Right.
Who you? That the point was to strip someone. No. It's to empower. On the contrary, it's to empower. You're everything.
Right.
You're everything. So how does it, what happened to, this will illustrate the point. The famous, what's his name though, Gabriel Zinner. Gabriel Zinner worked in the UN, he became a Lubavitcher, translated the first Tanya into English, knew many languages, so a big correspondence with him, I think he started at Yisrael, he was Satmar, and then became...
Gabriel
Oriel Zimmer, not Gabriel Moshe,
Yeah.
Oriel Zimmer.
Right.
So he relates. He was once in Yechidus. He said to the Rebbe, "It looks like the Rebbe like he changed Lubavitch. The prototype of the Deir HaShvi Chosed is nothing like the Deir HaShishi.
Really?
Yeah, he's savvy. This is in the 70s already. He's savvy. He's very worldly. And the Deir HaShishi Chosed was the Chosed davening for hours, Menuta, cut off from the world, transcendent, and the Batlin. The Rebbe changed Lubavitch. That's what he said to the Rebbe. He said, like, you've changed the direction completely. And the Rebbe said to him, after 6 generations of revealing the world per se is Ein Ve'efes, now we're ready to use it and make it
Cashing in.
And using it and revealing godliness in it. When it's lost its own I am and it surrenders to I am because you want me to be, now it's ready. So yeah, there was the bittul is garnished, but that's all a hachana. What's the garnished? The sheker part is garnished. Mm-hmm. But the truth that you're everything, that's the whole point of it.
Right.
And we're in a transition stage now. The Rebbe's message is still being, it's still being understood and expressed. And I think the schools are picking it up. And we've got great teachers like Manas and Yossi Jacobson or Simon Jacobson. I think they're doing a great job. We need more of these voices that champion the individual, the adrab, and the value. This is not a sugarcoating, you draw the kids. This is the truth. Mm-hmm. Your individuality. Our schools are so narrow. There has to be so much creativity, art, music. Why shouldn't this be part of the... It is starting to be. Not every kid's a learner. They can express their Jewishness in so many other ways. Right. It should be provided and encouraged, and it's legitimate. That's Vata Tetzava. That the Etzem and the Shomer, I am a Yid, I'm yours, and you're part of my life, is in the individual components that make me uniquely me. If it's surrendering that, if it's somehow blurring my individuality and its conforming my personality, my talent, then it's exactly the opposite of all. It's not about crushing. And I think it's happening. It's happening. It's happened faster, but it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, just to the actual the Gufa Shalinian, what you're reminding me is of a beautiful entry in the Rishimis that the Rebbe's Masber, the Mishnah of what time do you have to go?
Mincha, which we've got a while. We've still got a half an hour at least.
We've got a half hour. So there's a beautiful Rishima on the Mishnah of Machat Shinusuna Malasamar, right? And so a needle that is tamei and needs to be purified, so you have to bring the water over, right? You have to have the wave. We're talking about the wave earlier, right? And kivin shavar la gal Torah, you bring over the gal of Torah and bittul over the needle, it purifies it. But then the problem is, the needle can drown, right? So there's 2 points. First of all, it has to be a malas amara. It has to be on the step. You can't, if you lose the needle in the water, there's no point. That's a scharbev seder. And then what the Rebbe also adds is that it's a machat. A machat pricks. It has an identity. A machat's not a harmless instrument. It can hurt. And they're connected to the shishim, with the 1/60th of gaiva, the shmin shebeshminis. You have to have a little bit of gaiva, which I forget how he exactly translates it, but it's the idea of being bold in your kiyum of Torah mitzvahs. So it's that idea of bittul and not bittul and yeshus. It's more bittul of the things, bittul together with identity. When bittul means losing your identity completely, then you have a problem, because very like the famous joke about Lubavitchers is that they talk about bittul the whole day and they're the biggest yeshes, right? Why? Because when your identity becomes bittul, that's the ultimate kind of yesh, right? Like I'm going to show him who's batal, right? But when you're the bittul isn't your identity. The bittul is what allows your identity to be the purest identity.
That's right.
And the strongest identity, right?
Like the Rebbe asks, Har Sinai.
Right.
So
exactly.
if the message is humility, so give it in the valley.
Right.
No, it's got to be a mountain, but a humble mountain. It's not a bit of both.
Right. It's both at the same time.
It's not a balance. You kind of one without the other. The bittul is kishal atzmi ein ve'efes. A speck of dust in the whole bri is yesh ma'ayin, has no mitzias. You want me. You want me. That makes me absolutely everything. And you want me in all the limitations that you made me. And that makes every limitation, every talent, I have everything. So the bittul is what creates the emes isnasus.
Right.
That's why malchus is this enigma. On the one hand, malchus is bittul.
Right.
And it's isnasus. Well, what is it? Sovereign value. My sovereign value becomes everything because of what the Creator has invested and chosen.
Right.
You made me. That makes me everything.
Right. Right. So, I mean, I guess the question comes down to, you said earlier that you could have been an academic, but you're not an academic. You're a rabbi, right? And so, in the world of academia, when you learn a mimer and you learn, a mimer like Vatzav, and to me, maybe the word tragedy is too hard, but I'll just use it because I don't have a better word right now. But like the tragedy of Vatzav is that people, like it's learned almost as like, yeah, of course, this is it's like, because in every paragraph there's another jump that's like an infinite, right? In general, there was Marmarim are like that. Like in a few lines, you travel what other Marmarim take Hemshechim to get to, and it's like, first it's Kech Gelim, no, not Kech Gelim, it's Etzim. And it's not even Etzim, it's the Etzim, the way it comes out Kech Gelim. Each one of these steps is an infinite step. So on an academic paper, it's exciting, it's provocative, it lights up your mind in unusual ways. Wow, like it's like like a dazzling light that turns on. But in practice, the question is, can you have both, right? It sounds like you think we can have both. It also sounds like you agree that looking back, there was a period of time where we didn't have both. One of the things that I've thought about a lot over the course of this podcast with different people, one of the new things that I've thought about that have come from the conversations is a new appreciation for the Maimer Chazal that's brought all the time in Chassidus, but always seems to be left as like an abstract kind of mashal. It's the Maimer, I think it's from Gemara, but it takes 40 years adikam adaita derabe, right? It takes 40 years to fully appreciate, or at all appreciate, the meaning and then the perspective of the Rav. I don't remember in Yeshiva hearing how that, like, yes, it's brought in Chassidus as a mashal about tzimtzum and about the gulf between a creation and the creator, right? But it's also about a Rav and a Talmud, and certainly about a Rebbe and a Chassid, right? And like in Yeshiva, the idea of like the Rebbe haste, next day or that day you do it. Like the Rebbe haste, you got it. Like there's no lag, 40 years lag, right? But something that I've thought about is that maybe there's a lag. Like maybe the Rebbe was speaking about certain things, and you're talking earlier about the Yid, it being about the Yid and who the Yid truly is. That's what it's all about. It's not even about what he does in this world. What he does in this world is only to bring out his connection to Hashem. Maybe it's taking 40 years to figure out, what I was talking about. I'm saying we have this concept of like, the Rebbe said things, and then now we're trying to hold on. At least this is how it's brought up in Yeshiva. The Rebbe said it 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and now I'm trying to hold on to what the Rebbe said. If only I could live back then. If only I could go back in time. One of the most disturbing things I ever heard or was part of was I sent an email I used to sell programs to shliachim, as you remember, and I sent out an email by mistake announcing programs for the year 5770, and it was really the year 5780. So I made a mistake that I said it was 10 years earlier than it was. And somebody corrected me and says, if only I wish it was 10 years earlier, because it would be 10 years less away from Gimel Tammuz, but alas, we are 10 years further. And to me, I was like, it's such a sad way to live. It's an impossible way to live, living where you're like upset about time. Like the one thing you can't control is time moving. and you're upset about it, like it's like being upset about life. Like there's nothing you can do about it. So like there has been, at least when I was in yeshiva, there was this thing where like the Rebbe said it back then, and now we're just like holding on to the fumes. We're trying to grasp at straws. The idea of ad kama daita de Rabbi is that no, like it's going to take 40 years to figure out. You're 10 years closer to the truth.
On the contrary, yeah, I think it's in the contrary, exactly. Deeper understanding. In fact, the Rebbe kocht sich in the Tavshin Mem, 40 years from Tavshin Yud, the whole year was that whole koch. Now we actually get it. So on the contrary, with the passage of time, on a personal level, I can see that. My appreciation and a deeper understanding of that same mind that I learned, it's getting deeper and deeper and more relevant, more luminous and more vibrant.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to impart that, not to try, either you do or you don't, but when we learn Chassidus in the morning, this is now. And the Hashgacha Pratis, you're learning this maimer now. And we're like amazed at Hashgacha Pratis of what's going on and to the point of maimer we're learning. But that's because Hashgacha Pratis extends to everything, especially in the Torah and the Rebbe's Torah, so it's really striking often. But absolutely, the passage of time just clearer and clearer. And sometimes quantum, like we didn't get this at all. That's what he's saying.
Look, I wasn't there. You were there, which is why I'm bringing it up to hear what you think about it. I wasn't there. I grew up after that. But like to me, it almost seems like paradoxically, when the Rebbe is there saying it, because the Rebbe's presence is so large, it's almost like there's no space in the room for anything else. It's like, we're talking like there's no individual chassid. There's no like you remember like Vat Tetzaveh. My guess is when it came out, nobody understood it the way you just described it, because the idea. What do you mean? Like we are like there's individual chassid. No, like that's not what it means. Like it was probably understood completely different, right?
Very possible.
Right? And because like paradoxically, when the Rebbe is there, you can't even understand. You need distance to understand, especially large things like a mountain, right? Or even like I remember I was in San Francisco and I went for a jog, and so I went for a jog by the Golden Gate Bridge, which I don't know if you've ever been there. The scenery is beautiful. But then I figured, I'm already here. Let me extend my jog onto the Golden Gate Bridge. And it was hideous. The bridge is rusty. It's falling apart. The scenery's gone. It's noisy. And the joy is all lost. You only appreciate something that large from afar, right? And, it seems like, what do you think about that concept? Because, in a way, it may sound controversial. I don't think it's not even that provocative, but I wonder what you think about that. Because there's still for sure a fact where people feel that they are missing something profound today, right? Sugarcoat it, don't sugarcoat it. At the end of the day, Lubavitch has always been with a Rebbe that spoke to the moment, and whether it's because there's a crisis like there's right now in Eretz Yisrael, or just in general, like there's a leader who's guiding the ship, that's what it was, and there's something missing, right? But I feel like to only see it that way and not see an opportunity, I feel is I feel like it's missing an opportunity, obviously, but B, I feel like that leaves us only with negativity.
I totally agree with you. And the emes is the Rebbe himself set this pattern, this movement of distance, and on your own, and just over time, Yechidus phasing out. The early days, the first years, which car to buy, guys asked. And then gradually, the Rebbe removed himself from getting involved in this direct, do it this way. Even shlichus, early days, you go. He didn't want that. It's got to come milamata. It's got to be your truth. Take ownership. And Yechidus stopped, and even the way the Farbrengens were written. Mm-hmm. Towards the end, if you listen to the Farbrengen, the way they wrote it up, exactly, not my words. Assimilate it, discuss it, come and then write it, submit it, and I'll edit it if you're off, and sometimes they were. But the whole Farbrengen was a completely new creation. Then Mr. Rebbe's my Marimah that way, because he got that, the Rabbi got this from the Rebbe very clearly. He completely reworked the Yoel, reworked the Maimer in Seichel, in the logic and the Seichel, and then in a style that has uniquely Rabbi actually signature on it, and that's it. Hashgacha Pratis, so be it. So the Rebbe actually wanted that. He wanted that, and during his lifetime, it was continuing it that way. He wanted in Geman to say, find out, shlichus, and go, and be Mediyah and Gebrocha, beautiful. Not to have to be told and dictated from above.
That's very interesting, because I've always thought about the story about Hillel Paracher, the famous story where he heard a mimer, I think, from the Tzemach Tzedek, and he chazed it over to the Tzemach Tzedek, and Tzemach Tzedek said, that's not how I said it. He said, yeah, but that's how I heard it. So, I can't, the same way I don't own the mimer you said, you don't own the mimer that I heard.
He argued with him.
Right.
He argued with him.
This is what I heard, and this is for me the mimer, right? And it's interesting because what you're saying is that, because I used to say that in Yeshiva also, but everybody's like Rabbi doesn't exist in this mimer. And I'm like, what are you kidding? Like, listen to it on tape. It's a different mimer. It's not.
Rebbe edited it, so we treat it with the respect that it does.
Fine.
But the pale mamish, it has been filtered through.
I agree,
and that's what he wants. That's what Rebbe wants.
I'm not trying to blaspheme it. I'm not trying to say that it's not the Rebbe's. That's not. But there's a difference between a mimer that the Rebbe wrote and the Rebbe wrote in his words, or a mimer that was written and like you said, reworked and thought through by Rabbi and the way he thinks about things, which is very distinct.
And the first level,
and the Rebbe approves of it. And
the first level is just being there,
right?
Just being there, not even understanding it properly. But that's just the pure Rebbe,
right?
The moed is shining, and that's it. 90% didn't understand it even,
right?
So. Yeah, that's the 100%. And so in that sense, therefore, look, if this is true, it is true, then with the passage of time, it cannot be getting weaker. It can potentially and is, with all of the pitfalls, getting stronger. We're closer to Mashiach, not further. No matter what's going on. And it clearly, in terms of the kavon ha'alyona, which is v'ata tetzav again, that the etzem permeate the tachtim, mitzad the tachtim, the protim. That is what's happening, and that's the kavon ha'alyona, and therefore the individual's voice and understanding it, and the discovery and the unique contribution must become ever stronger, ever more powerful.
But
yeah.
You want to finish?
No, I'm just saying, again, the fascination with the Rebbe is not abated. But how is it coming? He's looking up and discovering and listening and saying, wow, it's coming. It's coming. It's at the matter. The matter is seeking. The matter is embracing it. The matter is internalizing it across the board.
Right, but you're saying, though, that I think what you're saying is that fascination with the Rebbe per se, like the Bochum gawking at the Rebbe or following
the
Rebbe.
That kind of fascination.
Right, I'm saying that
not overwhelming fascination.
The Mem's fascination is not necessarily what you're after over here.
No, not that. No. The fascination of how this resonates as true.
Right.
How this resonates as true.
Right.
And I want to understand this deeper.
Right.
I need to hear more. I want to know more.
Right. So to kind of tie everything together, we started off with this idea of, you growing up in the setting where, until there was an intervention with the shluchim, there was this kind of, I wouldn't say downward trajectory, but there was a trajectory of maybe, let's say, dilution, or some kind of assimilation, or settling down into the world. Because it doesn't seem like you're describing it in a negative way, but in terms of Lubavitch identity, there was certainly a dilution, a that's where the trend was, right? Which makes sense because after the war, you had a chassid here, a chassid there. In Australia, it was an extreme, right? Where there's just literally a handful of chassidim on a disconnected continent completely. And I have a feeling for that because I grew up even more disconnected in Hong Kong. But I grew up in that side of the world. You are disconnected from the rest of the world, right? So it makes sense that growing up there, you would not have the same kind of solid identity like your grandfather in Teichet Mimim or wherever he grew up with a group of chassidim and so on. Then there's this change, and you come to 770, and there's certainly, however you describe it, there is a narrative that the Rebbe himself spoke about, but it's certainly part of the Chabad kind of mythology of itself, where, everything is pointing towards Mashiach. So it's all on the up and up, right? Lubavitch is getting bigger. Lubavitch is getting stronger. The world is getting better. In the last years, I was talking about the fall of the Soviet Union, right? Everything's on the up and up. Yes, there's ups and downs, and there's the 6-Day War, and there's the Yom Kippur War, and there's other tsars, and there's still tsars in the Soviet Union, but on the whole, things are on the up, right? How do we understand our times today? To me, it's almost like both the first narrative and the second narrative are still around, and in a way they're competing with each other, right? Because on one hand, I think it's undoubtedly true that there is a sort of assimilation taking place or dilution taking place, right? There are kids growing up today, grandkids growing up today, post-Gimel Tammuz, and the same way that you looked at your grandfather, I don't know about your grandkids, but there are grandkids looking up at their grandfathers like you looked up at your grandfather. Wonderful man, looks the part of a chassid, but I don't relate to him. He loves me, I love him, but he's from a different world. There are kids today that look at their grandparents that way. That's one narrative, or one part of the narrative. Another part of the narrative is we're closer to Mashiach. We're still building. We're still getting bigger. We're still getting stronger. We're still moving forward. People are more interested in the Rebbe's message, right? We're not, like we said, we're not going a step backward. We're going a step forward. How do we reconcile these two competing trend lines?
The same way that it works for me when these American boys came and wow, they're American, cool, speak my language in my world, and yet they're Chassidim. We have been failing our children. The system has failed them, and as I said before, it's changing, and I hope just more rapidly. Everybody wants, everybody is seeking. It's the emes. We're all seekers. We're seekers of the truth. We're seekers of our own neshama, of the Eibishter. We just got to bring it to them in a way that's real for them. And that's all. Just the way we are conveying the message. All of it. Chassidus, Rebbe, Yiddishkeit, Torah.
But I'm not talking about my children. I'm talking about myself also. Like, I'm not talking just about chinuch to my children. Maybe it becomes more of an acute issue because it's a generation further along. But how do we understand it for ourselves? Like, where are we going? Are we still adamant about everything being on the up and up? Like, even to put it in more geopolitical terms, like the Soviet Union fell in the 90s, but it's been reconstituted and become a troublemaker in 2020, right? Like, but
there's still the freedom of religion, and Yiddishkeit hasn't been compromised.
Right, but the world, there was a moment in the 90s where America won, and things, like, people were writing things like the end of history.
Yeah.
And we've solved history. Like, we're in the clear now. Nobody thinks that today, right? And that's just on a geopolitical level. But on a deeper level, Jews today feel very, right now, acutely, they feel very, very isolated. They feel very disoriented, right? The Holocaust doesn't seem as far away in the rearview mirror as it used to, right? And so I'm not trying to get overly fixated with how things are right in this moment, but I think as a trend line, the idea of seeing things as just purely optimistic and things just getting better is harder to hold on to as the only thing that's true. Like, we are competing with two things, aren't we, or no?
Well, the Rebbe said we have to open our eyes. So this requires, perception and analysis, looking below the surface. I mean, it's not obvious necessarily. Even the matzav right now that we're in, this terrible matzav, I see an unprecedented awakening. I see Israel compelled to confront itself. For a long time, we were, kachol hagoyim, we just have our own country, we'll be fine, and that's the solution to the Jewish problem. It's all collapsed.
Right.
Jews everywhere are confronted, forced to confront. What is Jew? Why Jew? What's the obsession with us? How can anybody ignore the obsession of the world with this tiny percentage of the population, this small sliver of land? It's going to inevitably lead to this. The obsession with the world with us is because the world senses its own redemption is in our hands. In other words, anti-Semitism, this is the root of it, and this is all based on the Rebbe's teachings, but it took 40 years for me anyway to grasp it. The chosen people means we're chosen to be responsible. We're for the world. We're here in this world to bring godliness to the world, and the world senses that we want something from them. As much as we try and dumb it down, and like everybody else, they won't bite. We can be in a country for 500, 900 years on a dime. Germany, sophisticated Jews that assimilate them to tell you. Within a few years, this icon of culture turned into this barbaric, clinically barbaric, they still remain barbaric state. They're just... Hitler's problem with the Jew was he was a great believer in Darwinism and it's a survival of the fittest, and the Jews' insistence that all people are equal, a conscience, and so on. So all to say, their obsession with us is that they feel we want something from them. And if we don't say what it is, it's going to be, we want your daughters, we want your money, they'll just exploit it and strangle us with it. Until we come out with, I want something from you. It's not your daughter and it's not your money. I want you to live a godly life, because you're everything for God. God loves you. That is our mission. That's what chosen people means. And they're not letting us go. They're holding us, a stranglehold. We're the problem, we're the answer. No Jew can ignore this today. No Jew can ignore that we are the center of the world. The spotlight is on us. And the more we try to just be like everybody else, the more it's backfired. It's backfired. It breeds contempt, derision, and mistrust. Because the non-Jew looks at me and sees in my eyes, and I can't hide it. The neshama just pumps. I want something from you, and I'm saying I don't. So you're a liar. You're fundamentally, I don't trust you. Don't trust you. So we have to embrace this. Yep, you're right. There's something I want from you, and I am different. I'm sent here, without saying these words, I mean, just live it. I'm sent here to the world to make a world a home for God of which you are integral. And that, the Rebbe says, in an instant will just turn it all around. So the world's going to say, why didn't you tell us? This obsession that we are, again, Hitler, he laid the bare in the most distorted way. The Rebbe Shab says that as that evil, the Lashon there says the emes, and the greater the evil, the greater the truth. Communism, at some level we are all equal. There's a great truth to that. The workers' paradise is utopia, terribly corrupted. The Hitler was far worse. He said the Jew is not subhuman. He said the Jews are not inferior. Blacks are inferior. Gypsies are inferior. Poles, different levels of inferiority. The Jews are cancer.
Right.
He called himself the Messiah, because the nature of nature is to evolve. The Aryan race is the superior race. And to insist that all people are equal, made in the image of God, this retards the natural growth of civilization, the survival of the fittest. And he sought to clinically remove this, he didn't hate, beyond hate, clinically remove this cancer from the world. So he exposed that we're some other category. We're foreigners, we're fundamental foreigners. What is? The neshama is not part of the bria. It's a chelek alakam mamish. It's fundamentally foreign to creation. And it's come down to creation to reveal godliness. And the day Hashem is welcome is the day we're welcome, and it comes together. And the world its obsession with us is to hear this. What do you want? What are you bringing? What do you want from me?
Right.
So the answer to anti-Semitism is to embrace the roots. I mean, just historically, Christianity, Islam, it's all rooted in the Torah by their own admission. Muhammad can't contradict a single thing it says in the Torah.
Right.
And so we've got to embrace our roots, and the branches will either heal or fall off. But that's where it is. The war with Christianity is over. They've apologized. Crusades are over. It's the final Notz Chilas and B'Seifon, Avram and Yishmael. The very beginnings come round now. This is the great, and it's an ideological battle. They're saying it is. They're saying it is. It's an ideological battle. We're the roots. We embrace it. We live it. We share it. It's light. They're darkness. They have no substance. There's no such thing as a Palestinian people. It's just a huge bluff and sheker. There was never a cause in the world that has garnered so much attention, pouring in billions, and it doesn't even exist. A bit of probing, the religion, just a bit of probing. What's the history here? Nonsense. And yet, it's a sheker, like the Rebbe told Bibi, it's a cheshech. How do you fight it? Just light the candle of truth. We will live as Jews truly, and it's an extraordinary time, and I believe it's happening. We're going to transform this whole thing in an instant. In an instant.
But tie it back to Lubavitch. Lubavitch, right? You're basically taking a situation that seems to be a serious downturn in this narrative of
progression towards
Mashiach, and you're showing how, if on the surface it looks that way, there's also on a deeper level, there's a way to look at it that points in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the Lubavitch question. So, it's 30 years or close to 30 years after Gimel Tammuz. There are more and more children, in terms of proportion or numbers, who are disenchanted or disenfranchised from the Lubavitch story, or at least that's how they feel. In many ways, it feels like things are I don't know, falling apart, but diluting and
we're losing the battle.
Right. So how do we?
We're losing your kids.
So how do you look at it? How do you look at it? It's okay. So it seems like you insist that we can still see it as something still getting closer to Mashiach, right? How do you look at it that way?
I think even with our kids, look, we have failed them, but I think we're waking. I think it's changing. I think the schools are changing. I think the system is changing. I think the language is changing. I think we are. I hope. I think we are reaching our kids. The kids are disenchanted through no fault of their own. We just failed to convey the message, the joy, the value, their value. That this is the Rebbe's essential message. You are everything. It's starting to get traction a little bit. But that's what the Rebbe means. 40 years later or 30 years later, let's wake up. I believe it is happening. I believe it is happening. And our kids, externally, who knows where they are, but I think that the Pnimius, they're so close. Just needs the emes, love and embrace. And in a moment there, it's okay. We're here. I don't see that. I don't see. It's not if it's an ideological rejection, which means not even that mostly. But even if it is, it's because they didn't no one told them what the real story is. Now is the time. Now is the time. Now is the chassidus, the relationship with the God. I'm going to conclude with a story. Rabbis like to tell us. This is the MTC story.
Please
say this at every occasion that I can. If your listeners will benefit from it, it's worth it. So I don't know if the story actually happened, but it's a great story. The message is good. So after the 1967 war, I was 10 years old. I recall that. I mean, that was such a high. There was such they were cried by the upbringing, Jewish leadership failed. I mean, Yidden was so ready just to be taken to shul, to your Shabbos table. There was such an isodidus and such an awakening. Jewish pride. The whole world was enamored. Kolponim. So Miftah Tefillin, what do you about Miftah Tefillin? And the Rebbe's Nevuah, and so the story goes. You've heard the story probably. Train is going, and there's a rabbi sitting in the train, Nishkin Lubavitch, and on gets an officer, and he's caught up in the whole euphoria of the miracle Niftzah Tefillin, and he approaches the officer to put on tefillin, and he politely declines. No, thank you. All right. Story goes that the next stop was Reb Mendel, or whoever it was, a chassid. And the first rabbi watches the scene. There's a little conversation there. Next thing he sees, the officer's rolling up his sleeve, putting on film, and he's hurt, frankly. Although he's happy that the officer's putting on film. So he approaches him and says, can you explain this to me? The officer, after it's done, I asked you, you declined. He did, you said yes. What's the difference? So the story goes that the officer said to the Rav, when you asked me to put on film, I sensed you were saying to me, put on film and be Jewish. Well, I am Jewish, thank you very much, so no thank you. I felt he was saying, you're Jewish, so put on film. I mean, for too long is, do this and become. No, that's who I am, so liberate, express it. This simply expresses you. That's a big chiddush, underscored never mind over and over again. Torah mitzvahs don't create us, they express us. Right. It's all, they serve the Jew. We don't serve Yiddishkeit. It's an Avodah Zarah. It's the Yid. And Yiddishkeit is there to express the Jew. So it's actually liberating, it's freedom. Right. All these different mitzvahs are just the different ways that I express myself. So they're not burdens. They're this message is not being conveyed clearly. It doesn't, you become, undertake, and do. You're perfect. You don't even need it. But emes, you don't need it. So why? Because God wants you to express, you are one with Him, and He wants that to illuminate, that your body should feel it, your hand should feel the words and see it. He loves us so much, He wants the whole world to know this. When you'll have, this was an old record, when you'll love the whole world is Jewish. It's an old, this message, the relationship, mitzvahs, is God's request to be part of, to express that connection, which you are, whether you do it or not. You are. And the whole consequences and reward. We're back to the Garden of Eden. There are no consequences. You planted, you got right away. Today's world, it's got to be, tell me it's now. No, yeah, and it is now. It's the relationship right now. It's not about what it's going to bring. It does, but that's the peripheral. It is about the relationship, and you count. And every detail of your life is everything. That's when we need to convey this. This is the Rebbe's Chassidus. This is, like I told you the story, just bring me another Jew so I can give him that $1 and tell him, make her feel that. Everybody says this. When you went by for the $1, you were the only person in the world. Everybody says that because that's the emes. And it was not this great psychologist, rabbi, made everybody feel good. It's a pure emes. You are everything. And he wasn't a martyr. You know, when he devoted his time, you are everything. It's a privilege to be with you. And every Jew, that sense, that emes, is what we need to convey to our children. They've got to see the joy in us and the parents and the educators. And they'll gravitate, they'll come back, they'll gravitate. It's who they are, it's beautiful, it's true, it's emes. It's not their fault. And not even our fault. It's a learning curve coming from the Holocaust, all the things, survival, and all of the insulate survival, put up walls. The world's not the enemy. No one's the enemy. It's a dira waiting to be illuminated, to be touched. Every human being is waiting to be touched. That's how the Rebbe taught them. What you're afraid of. Don't go defensive. You don't have to combat. You don't embrace. Basi Lagani, it's a beautiful garden waiting to blossom. Every child is. And we have that attitude and we convey the message properly. It's oir. It illuminates lots of darkness and confusion. It doesn't take much. In an instant. The power of light. As you correctly says, as time goes on, the message gets clearer, understand it deeper. Much more. Much more. Read the Icarus, everything just becomes so much, it resonates so much more powerfully than I ever understood it. Every mind, everything.
All right, on that note, that's a beautiful way to end. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
The
music for this podcast comes from the album Repentance Doors by Oren Sor Nadav Bachar and is used with their permission.